What's up YouTube, I'm Guy, and today we're talking about the watch that amounts to be the biggest mistake that Seiko has made in recent years, at least in my opinion. What we're talking about today is the limited edition release of the 2017 SLA017. It's a reissue of the historic Seiko 62MAS dive watch. It's a watch that I think is absolutely amazing on so many levels, yet it marks the beginning of Seiko descending down the rabbit hole of ad nauseum, limited editions, and the price creep of Seiko brand watches being pushed up market. Now, of course, this watch is on loan from my good friends over at my local Naples, Florida watch dealer, Exquisite Timepieces. Exquisite is an authorized dealer of dozens of watch brands, including Seiko. And they still had this very watch in box, new, unworn, in their inventory. So a big thanks to them for loaning me this watch for a bit and letting me check it out. And hey, if you guys are looking for new or pre-owned watches, I think you should definitely check them out. Visit their website, exquisitetimepieces.com. If you call them up and talk to Evan to talk watches, let him know Guy says hi. So this is actually a review I almost didn't make. I shot the video several months ago, and I've been sitting on it ever since. It's a watch that I was thoroughly impressed with, and I felt like I couldn't do the type of in-depth feature-length review video that I wanted to, given my limited amount of time with it. It is the type of watch that I'd like to wear for a few weeks, really get to know it inside and out through wrist time and experience, and then make a video diving into every little detail. And I knew I couldn't do that. I felt like if I can't do it that way, why bother? But I've been thinking about it, and the real story behind this watch really isn't how awesome it is. And don't get me wrong, it's awesome in a lot of ways. The story is about how badly Seiko dropped the ball with the release and the rollout of this timepiece, and the direction the company has gone since then. But before we get into all of that, let's take a look at the watch. Let me give you my impressions of it, given my limited amount of time with it, and then we'll talk about all of those other things. The storage and presentation case that this watch comes in is nice. Once opened, you're presented with both the watch on its silicone strap and, of course, the accompanying stainless steel bracelet, along with all of your official Seiko papers. The watch itself is, at least to my eye, absolutely striking. At just under 40 millimeters in diameter with a roughly 48 millimeter lug-to-lug wingspan on a 20 millimeter strap, it's sized and scaled perfectly for me. It's a bit thick at a hair over 14 millimeters, but that's a non-issue in my opinion. It feels great on the wrist. You have all the hallmarks of a high-quality dive watch, including 200 meters of water resistance, a screw-down crown, of course the unidirectional elapsed time bezel, outstanding Seiko lume, and a perfectly legible watch face. It also comes with a domed sapphire crystal, extremely high quality case finishing, and one of the best looking gray sunburst dials with applied markers I've seen. The dial features a nicely framed date complication, and the handset is in stainless steel and of a simple and understated style that has a certain vintage charm I love without the need to reduce itself to any sorts of tricks with faux patina to give the viewer the impression of being vintage. I think it goes without saying, I absolutely love the design of this watch. I'd go so far as to say it's my favorite Seiko dive watch, and there isn't a close second. In terms of style, it's rare that I find a watch design where I can't find anything on the dial or hands, the bezel, or the case that I would change. I love that Seiko didn't use their ubiquitous broad arrow handset here, and having the crown at 3 o'clock is certainly a deviation from the typical Seiko design cues that we've all grown accustomed to. But it all just works really well. The case finishing, like I said, fantastic. It has brushed surfaces on the top extending down the lengths of the lugs with mirrored high polish on the case flanks, and is in a shape that's both unique and interesting without being so far out there as to look off-putting. It also includes a Seiko signed crown with lug hole perforations for easy strap changes, which is a nice addition to a watch that's meant to be first and foremost a tool watch. The slightly sloped bezel assembly with finely cut coin edge is well done as any bezel out there, and the action is great. The knurling on the crown and the threading action is equally top-notch, and at least on the example I have here, when screwed down, the logo on the crown is perfectly positioned horizontal. I'm not sure if that's a happy coincidence or if it's by design, but it lines up nicely on this particular watch. The screw-down case back features the 8L35 movement designation, along with some branding text, your limited edition number, and the dolphin emblem that would have been found on the original 62MAS watch, for which this design is based on. Speaking of the movement, this watch features the 8L35 Seiko in-house movement. This movement is advertised as an undecorated and unadjusted version of the Grand Seiko 9S55 caliber. It's 26 joules, automatic self-winding, running at 28,800 vibrations per hour with a 50-hour power reserve. It has advertised accuracy in the range of -10 to +15 seconds per day, and at the price, for me, that's actually kind of a problem. For a watch coming in at around $4,000, I can't accept an unadjusted movement with such wide specifications for accuracy. Sure, you will probably find a lot of examples that are much more accurate than +15 seconds per day, but I expect tighter tolerances at this price. And what about being unadjusted? Does that really matter? Unadjusted doesn't mean unregulated. It's important to understand that distinction. Now, my understanding is that adjusting a watch movement means that the timing rate error is minimized as the watch hangs in different positions or orientations. For example, an unadjusted watch might run +10 lying in the dial-up position and -10 hanging in the crown down position. Adjusting the movement minimizes the variance and error from one position to the next. Regulating the watch is a simpler adjustment that moves the total average rate into more correct daily timing. From my own personal experience, trying to regulate the average daily rate of an unadjusted watch with a large discrepancy in positional accuracy can be very difficult. My other complaint about the watch, at least from a technical standpoint, is the strap and bracelet. The silicone strap is okay. It's soft and it's pliable, but it's an absolute lint magnet and far too long for my wrist. Silicone is also not nearly as durable and long-lasting as something like vulcanized rubber, and at the price, I'd expect something a bit better. But the package does also include a bracelet. However, it's a bracelet that really is no better in quality than what you might find on a $500 Seiko Prospex model watch. Neither one of these options really match the watch itself in terms of quality and feels sort of like an afterthought, and frankly, that's kind of a shame. That aside, I do love it, and it's easily the best dive watch Seiko has ever released. It's impressive on a technical level, its design is absolutely one of a kind, and it looks fantastic on the wrist, despite the issues that I have with the straps. It wears great because of the size and the shape of the case and the overall presentation of the face. It's just so well done. It's one of the best Seiko watches I've ever seen, and yet it's one of their biggest mistakes. So what's wrong with this watch? Well, aside from the technical complaints that I've already pointed out, which are frankly minor shortcomings that don't in and of themselves really color my enthusiasm for this awesome timepiece, my issue with it is the way it was released, and what's happened at Seiko since. This SLA017 reissue of the 62MAS was unveiled at Baselworld 2017 and made available to purchase from ADs and boutiques sometime shortly thereafter. It had a list price of plus or minus $4,000 if memory serves, and it was limited to just 2,000 pieces. In the nearly 3 years since that release, we've seen Seiko repeat this formula over and over again, limited edition watches with higher and higher asking prices. First, the watch on which this is based, the 62MAS, is a historically important timepiece for the brand. The design of the original, and of course by extension this reissue, is so nearly perfect that it's laughable to me that Seiko didn't make it their premier flagship dive watch. Limiting this watch to just 2,000 pieces was a blunder of epic proportions. It's the watch that truly had the potential of giving Seiko a product with which they could compete with the other iconic dive watches on the market, including the Omega Seamaster and the Rolex Submariner. And it could have done it at a much better price point than those watches, and at a time when nobody could buy a Rolex Submariner. Next is the price. When it was released with an asking price of plus or minus $4,000, it was frankly shocking. Now, of course, like a lot of manufacturers, they justified overpricing their products by hiding them behind the veil of exclusivity and making the watch quote-unquote limited edition. I believe if this watch had been a standard production model, priced between $2,000 and $2,500, or improved the quality some with some of the components such as the bracelet and sold for $3,000, it would be the most popular and best-selling entry-level luxury diver on the market. At $3,000, it would have been competing with the likes of the Tudor Black Bay range and featured, at least in my opinion, a much better design and aesthetic, and would have dropped at a time when everyone was looking for an affordable alternative that was available to the Rolex line of dive watches. Finally, there's the overall quality. And look, it is great on a lot of levels, and I do love the watch, but the 8L35 movement needs a better specification for accuracy at the asking price. I don't care about the decoration aspect at all, but -10 to +15 seconds per day isn't going to cut it for me. The bracelet is mostly a joke considering the price as well. I'd be fine with it on a $500 to $1,000 Prospex diver, but for multiple thousands of dollars, it's frankly unacceptable. I'm also not a fan of the silicone strap, but that's mostly to do with my personal tastes. But I don't find it a welcome addition to the package at all. When I look back at this release, it's clear to see the roadmap that Seiko had drawn out, and it was probably on a napkin at a cocktail party, but I now see the direction they were intending to steer the company. I've made several videos over the last year or two talking about my disappointment with the brand, and I've been called a Seiko hater many times because of my strong opinions on the subject. Look, I'm not a hater, not at all. I'm so impassioned about this topic because I'm actually a huge fan of Seiko, and I hate the direction they've been taking the company. As I've discussed in previous videos, the higher-ups at Seiko USA, they're on record as saying they no longer want to be in the entry level of watchmaking. They've started this process of abandoning the notion that they make the best quality watches for the price, and they want to go to war with the mid-tier and luxury level watchmakers such as Rolex and Omega. But here's the thing. Their customers bought their products because they weren't those expensive and pretentious Swiss watches with high prices. They bought Seiko watches because they were rugged, they were reliable and affordable, and they featured great styling and design. And look, a lot of that is still true, but what has changed is that they no longer have their long-standing customer in mind. They're much more concerned now about creating an image and a brand that expresses the same shortcomings as those Swiss counterparts, luxury and exclusivity. The problem is, no one asked for that. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap this one. My cat sneezing. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap this one up for today. Thanks for tuning in and watching the video. As always, I do truly appreciate it. Check the description for a list of ways that you can help me out and ways that you can help support the channel, including links to my Patreon page, my Amazon affiliate link as well. Thanks to everyone that's been helping me out on Patreon, and especially thanks to everyone that's been using my Amazon link when you're buying anything I've reviewed on Amazon. Those commissions that I get, they do add up and they do help me out. Well, with that said, I'm gonna wrap this one up for today. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off and say bye now.